It's 10 o'clock. It's time for the council meeting session. We have Mr. Sikowski, Mr. Dia, Mr. Ridley Thomas, Mrs. Zavarni. We have 5 members present. We need 5 more for the quorum. Call the roll.
Brinson, Chick, Fear, Galante, Goldberg, Hernandez, Holden, Miskowski, Pacheco, Padilla, Ridley Thomas, Warner, Wax, Walters, Ferraro, 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Yeah, let me point out that this is a meeting of the City Council for the City of Los Angeles on the 16th day of February, the year 2000. There are 15 council districts in the city. The regular meeting days are Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We are currently being viewed by cable subscribers throughout the Los Angeles area on Channel 35, and we're also being monitored by council phones. First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
All right, Mr. Hernandez moves, Mrs. Chick second. If there's no objections, unanimous vote. Next item.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
If there's no objections, unanimous vote. Next item.
Before beginning the regular agenda, there are several items to continue. Items number 9 and 10, request to continue to February 23rd.
If there's no objections, we will continue those. That would be the order.
Items 15, 16, 17, Councilmember Galante requests those be continued 1 week to February 23rd.
If there's no objections, unanimous vote.
Item number 28, Councilmember Swarnish requests that be continued to Tuesday, February 22nd.
Item 28,
Yes, Mr. President.
if there's no objections, unanimous vote. Next item.
Items noticed for public hearings, items 1 through 6 are building and safety confirmations of assessments.
Is there anybody in the audience wants to be heard on item 1 through 6? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Any special by council members? If not, prepare the roll on 1 through 6. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item.
Mr. President, next items 7 and 8, both are ordinances. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, yes.
Do you wish to hold the public hearing and then vote on the ordinances later?
Yeah, is there anybody in the audience who wants to be heard on 7 or 8? We have a card on 8. Paul Novak, you want to be heard on 8?
Very briefly.
You're in favor,
Yes,
so don't waste your time.
thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right, the public hearing's closed on 7 and 8, and we'll wait for 12 members. Next item.
Items for which public hearings have been held, items 11 through 21, with the exception of 15, 16, and 17.
Okay, 11 and 12 are ordinances, so we'll hold those. 13, 14, and 18 through 21. Any specials by council members? 21 is called special. Any others? If not, prepare the roll on 13, 14, 18, 19, 20. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. All right, we have 12 members present, so prepare the roll on 7, 8, 11, and 12. Those are ordinances.
And also 22 is an ordinance. We haven't got it.
And 22 is a hearing, so, all right, prepare the roll on 7, 8, 11, and 12. Tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Those are approved. Item 7 is an urgency clause, so forthwith on that. Next items.
Items for which public hearings have not been held, items 22 through 32.
All right, anybody in the audience wants to be heard on any of those items? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Any specials by council members? 23, 27. Any others?
We need a forthwith on 11. Forthwith on 11.
Okay,
Ethics, you've got to get through so that.
okay. All right, okay. All right, prepare the roll on 22 through 32 with the exception of 23, 27, 28 has been continued, and 32. Tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
That is approved. Forthwith on item 11. Next item.
Next item, Mr. President, on the well, you have closed session as item number 33 and 35. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes.
Item number 34 on the continuation page, item for which public hearing has been held.
All right. Any discussion on 34? Huh? Special? Why didn't you stay in the marina a little longer, Nate? We would have been through by now. No. Okay. All right, now let's, is there anybody in the for public comment period? We have public comment. We don't have any cards. Anybody want to be heard on any public comment item? Seeing none, the public comment period is closed. Next item.
Yep, Mr. President, forthwith on item 31.
Forthwith on 31. Next item.
Item number 21, called special by Councilmember Holden.
Mr. Holden?
Before you commence my time as president, I really have to have a report on this, why you're going to move MOS 3 money to and reappropriate it for other projects. The rationale for that.
Is there anybody here on that item? Transportation Committee, did you want to, well, he wants a report. Who's going to give the report?
So MOS 3 goes to East LA, goes to Mid-City, I mean, you know, and the money was set aside for this purpose, and now you're going to move it, we'll have less money than we need in order for those projects.
Let him give you the report.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Jerry Miller with the CLA's office. This item is an amendment to the MOS 3 contract. Essentially, it does two things. It limits the segment 3 only to the North Hollywood extension. It eliminates the east side and the mid-city extensions. It also reduces the city's contribution from $200 million to $92 million. Excuse me. The mechanism for making the city's contribution is using FTA funds. The council and the mayor provided $15 million in the current year budget in order to, as a partial payment towards this. However, through the negotiations, the funding will come from included municipal operator funds, which the city currently cannot access. The effect of this is to free up the $15 million. And we are proposing the use of $3.5 million of that, $2 million for the North Hollywood Economic Development Program, which the council previously approved, and another $1.5 million for Pico Garnier.
Okay, Mr. Holden?
There were $15 million allocated for
to three.
MOS 3. For what purpose was the money allocated?
For purposes of making a partial payment towards the city's contribution under the revised agreement.
To MTA?
To the MTA, that's right.
But not for maybe acquisition or set aside for future development?
No, the $15 million was appropriated specifically to pay the MTA a portion of the city's MOS 3 contribution.
But the $200 million has been canceled. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. What we're saying is the $200 million is now reduced to $92 million. The balance of the city's contribution of that is 34.
Well, I'm a little confused, and maybe Mr. Savernis can help me. It was my understanding that a portion of the money, and the county, Ms. Burke agreed with it because she had to go along with that, that monies would be set aside for land acquisition for Mills Street, Mid-City, and perhaps East LA as well, when the time came where they would reconsider doing transit in that corridor, they would have the land, they would have access and control, site control. Now, what are you telling me now?
The 15 million provided in the current year budget was, as I said, a partial payment for the city's
All
payment
right, now
towards
with
MOS
MTS,
3.
with the understanding that MTA would acquire some land?
No, the east side and mid-city extensions were eliminated from MOS 3. So the 15 million was specifically provided for the North Hollywood extension.
I'm still not clear on this issue, Mr. President. Could we, for clarity, for my purposes, does affect my district, MOS 3, I'd like to hold this till Friday so we can sit down with the DOT. Well, okay, in that case, I have to vote. No, well, no, I'm not going to. Rudy, is there any reason why, maybe you could explain it to me, because I'm not getting a real message here. It's my understanding that $9 million would be set aside for land acquisition of MO3 at Mid-City. Now, what are you saying to me now? And we would contribute toward that with MTA. That was an agreement. What happened to the agreement?
The original $200 million agreement,
I know that was for to build the system.
it included the mid-city and east side lines. The mid-city and east side lines have been eliminated from MOS 3.
I know that, but at the same time, the commitment is made to acquire certain parcels of land. Is that correct, yes or no?
Not for the mid-city or east side
Yes,
extensions.
it is.
Well, then if you know everything about it, why are you
That's
asking
what I'm saying.
questions?
Then why take the money is what I'm saying, and how are you going to replace the money to achieve the goal, the purpose? That's what I'm saying.
Situation is that that initial contract
I know what that was.
had estimates of the amount of money that was available at that point. That money is not available. What we're doing is we're paying for that part that is moving ahead at MTA with the money that we have. There is not sufficient funds either at MTA or within the city's Prop C monies to fund that entire contract. So what we're doing is picking
What's
this,
the entire contract you're talking
that
about?
$200 million
I
contract.
know that, too.
Okay. So those things that are in there are still objectives, but they are not funded because neither the MTA nor the city's revenues match those projects.
Sounds like McCain and I are going to have to take some more money from you.
Okay, Mr. Hernandez, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, and again, we did not initiate this process. MTA put certain projects on hold, and in doing that, they served notice that they didn't have the funding to fund them. We had an agreement that basically agreed to provide certain amount of funding for them to do those projects. Now, they're not doing those projects, at least this year, they're not doing those projects, and it's not part of their work order. We were able to negotiate with them for us to be able to meet the match required through another source of funding, so it doesn't have to come through our IST monies, and that's why this money is discretionally available. Now, the two projects that are before us, neither of the two projects are in Mr. Svornich's district or my district, but we were the committee that saw the proposals, are projects that this council took a position to support. And so we're restructuring the money to basically complete those projects, primarily in the North Hollywood area, and I need Mr. Wax to assist me here because it's his area, Mr. Ferraro's area, that we basically as an entire council agreed to take actions and to complete. And that's why we're restructuring the money for that to happen. The other thing is some of the work you currently see going on at Elvira Street in terms of some of the improvements. And that's why, so that's what's before us right now, those two projects. This money is available because of MTA's action, not because of the council's action. And if MTA was to take further action to include those projects, then we would have other resources at that time to deal with those issues.
All right, Mr. Bernsen.
Yes, members of the council, this is very important that we take advantage of this. This is an outstanding agreement that was negotiated with MTA, and if we don't proceed, we're going to lose out. This is the only project available, actually, where the balance of this money can be used because as a result of Zev's motion, and which was adopted by the voters, We're probably not going to have a subway station. We're not going to have subway to the Central Corridor or to East Los Angeles, at least not in the foreseeable future. But there are a couple things that need to be corrected in this thing that could cause some problems for the people over in that area. And I have a 21A. If you have it, I'd appreciate if you all take a look at it. It points out the potential lack of parking at Universal City Station will discourage use of the red line and undermine the very purpose of the significant contribution of public dollars to its construction. While the need for construction staging is valid, it is essential that as much parking as possible be provided when the station opens, and every effort be made to ensure that no delays in the completion of the construction and to accelerate construction were feasible, so that the remaining land will be available for parking as soon as possible. I therefore move that this council stipulate that the approval of the proposed amendment to MOS 3 agreement between the city and MTA is contingent upon provision of 250 parking spaces for the Universal City Station on the day it opens. I further move that DOT be directed to report back as soon as possible, but in no more than 30 days on, 1, schedule for completion of the signaling and street improvements which must be in place so the initial parking lot at Universal City Station can be opened on the day the station is opened. And 2, the MTA's plan for construction staging for both the freeway bridge and the pedestrian underpass to Universal Studios to maximize the availability of parking during construction. 3, a schedule for all Caltrans reviews which may impact construction. 4, the penalties included in the contract between the MTA and its contractors for construction delays. And 5, recommendations on whether financial incentives should be proposed to encourage the contractors to complete the work ahead of schedule. These are very important factors that should be amended to this agreement, and the purpose of that is to ensure that there is parking there for the people of the community, so they will have the ability to park and use the station. Otherwise, they're going to have to cross the freeway and Ventura Boulevard for auxiliary parking, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I would urge that we approve the amendment and approve the agreement. I know MTA is not happy about this, but this is something that's necessary to protect the city and protect the community over there. So I would urge an aye vote on the amendment and an aye vote on the agreement 21 before us.
Mr. Wax?
Yeah, perhaps Mr. Deaton can help us. Hal, I certainly agree with what you want to accomplish. My concern about making it contingent is that if that is not done on time, I don't want, for example, the money for the North Hollywood business community to recover from the damage that they've suffered to be delayed because the parking wasn't provided at Universal. This part, I know. I'm telling you that my concern is that if we condition it upon something that doesn't happen, I don't want to undercut the ability to proceed with the business improvement district in the North Hollywood station. I totally agree with what you want to accomplish. What I need to ask for Mr. Deaton is if we adopt the language of the first move, that it be contingent upon that. And what happens if they do not come up with the 250 spaces by that specific day? I mean, I want them to do it, but I don't want, if they don't do it, I don't want to at least not go ahead with the North Hollywood bid. So tell me...
Two things. One is that the MOS 3 agreement and the bid are separate issues. We will proceed with the bid, notwithstanding the MOS 3 agreement.
The $2 million will be set aside as the money for El Pueblo will also be set aside?
Exactly.
Okay, then that's what I wanted to assure myself, Mr. Burns, because I think you're absolutely right. I'm at the intersection that you're talking about, so nobody feels it more than me. I go there every day. That's how I go back and forth to work. And
I thought you lived in Shadow Hill.
The need to deal with that is really important. On the other hand, the need to go ahead with the improvement district in North Hollywood with the merchants along Lankershim that have suffered so greatly during this period of construction is really imperative that be able to begin as the red line opens and that they can coordinate their efforts. So with that understanding, I happily support your amendment, Mr. Burnson.
Thank you.
Ms. Chick?
President, members, I rise to object, and the reason why is because the people throughout that Wilshire corridor has been deceived. It was they the commitment was made years ago when they had the 18-point miles or 13-point whatever. They went straight down Wilshire up to Hollywood and into the valley. And even today, you don't have on the drawing board any intentions of finishing out that corridor, at least up to MOS 3, which stops at Mid-City. Everyone else has gotten theirs, and now you're thumbing your nose up at the Wilshire corridor. The monies were set aside to acquire land, even though after the last proposition put on by Zev, I mean, they got theirs in the valley now, they were saying, okay, let's not do any tunneling anymore. Let's do above grade level. When they were tunneling, they had every excuse not to proceed by bypassing Wilshire corridor in the area that you and I represent and going to Mid-City. The monies were set aside to acquire land for future development of the rail system. I must tell you that Washington made a commitment to assist us in matching funds if we did certain things. Now, maybe you guys, some of you were not here at the time, but be assured that you're not keeping the commitment. And so I have no choice but to do what I did once before, is to go back and let Washington know you have not done that. And whatever I can do to hold the money up until such time that your commitment is made.
Oh, Nate,
To the
that
Wilshire-
is very, very threatening.
Yeah, I threatened you before, it didn't
yeah.
happen, it worked.
Well, we'll see what the vote is, and
Well, go ahead, go
We'll
with.
follow you- we'll
go-
follow you,
Go with your 12 to
what-
1, because
whatever-
two people are absent.
whatever room you go into, we'll follow them with a 12 to 1
Won't make any
vote.
difference. Won't make any difference. You lost before, you lose again.
Yeah, okay. All right, Mr. Hernandez wants to move previous question?
Well, Mr. President, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Holden because I think that I'm very committed to the Mid-Wilshire Line extension. I'm very committed to the East Side Line, and I think it's important that we understand that the city is not retracting from its commitment on this action. What we need is MTA to fulfill that commitment. Again, I will support Mr. Holden in any move to make that happen. And I think the Chair, Yvonne Burke, has said that. What we're talking about now has nothing to do with that action. Until the board of MTA takes that action, we don't need to basically provide this funding. And MTA gave us a mechanism that basically allowed us to meet that match that freed a lot of this money. And so I'm just saying that until MTA makes that decision, we as a city can't continue those extensions. And I'm very supportive of those extensions, and I want to support Mr. Holden in his moves. And I'll go back to Washington with him if it includes trying to get some funding to make it happen.
Mr. Vornich?
As chair of the committee, Mr. President, with all due respect to Mr. Holden does make some very valid points in regards to the commitment of funding. But what the committee had to consider, as Mr. Hernandez has clearly articulated, is a reaction to what occurred at the MTA. I agree with Mr. Holden, and as he has reminded me in the past, that commitments were made in regards to the projects to which he has expressed to this council this morning, but we have to do what we have to do now because of what MTA did. They remain a priority, but also, as Mr. Deaton said, we cannot go forward without the funding being placed. So I would like to move the committee's report.
Mr. Ridley Thomas? Okay, any objection to the previous question? Seeing none. All right, prepare the roll on 21A. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes, 1 no.
That is approved. Now we have 21 as amended. Prepare the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes, 1 no.
Okay, that is approved, and we'll send it forthwith. Next item, we have item 23. Mr. Hernandez, you call that special, is there?
Mr. President, I'm not sure if Recreation and Parks is here, but I'd like to continue this item till they can be here for purposes of presentation. I read the report, and this was us asking how we can use Quimby funds and expand the areas. And one of the issues they talked about is they said that we're limited to 1.5 miles from where housing development happens as to where these Quimby funds can be placed. And the intent of the motion, I've been dealing with this issue since first got elected to the council, is the state legislation does not limit us to 1.5 miles. It's the department's policy that does that. And so the department isn't really looking at how it is that we can use Quimby funds to expand our recreation areas. beyond the 1.5 miles of a development project. I happen to know what the state legislation says, and so I was surprised that the department continues to be real restrictive as to how those funds can be used on their report. And I just would like them to come and with the city attorney.
Is there anyone here from the Recreation and Parks Department? Why don't we just lay this on the desk, Mr. Herman?
Yeah, well, I was thinking we could just continue till Friday, and then they could make a more formal presentation.
Okay. If there's any objection to continue 23 until Friday, seeing none, that will be the order. Okay, we're going to take item 27 next. Ms. Misakowski, 27.
I would like to ask, I think the police chief is in the back room. This is the matter where a number of my colleagues asked for the police chief to come in a public session and give us a briefing on the investigation that's thus far and the pending release of the Board of Inquiry report that the department is working on. So I'm inviting the chief, and I see Deputy Chief Bostic coming in. I'm not sure if we'll be joined by the city attorney as well, but I'd like to have a presentation to the council and the public.
Cindy, let me just say that obviously the TV wants to get the chief's action, so we've allowed them to put their cameras behind us. So they're pretty obnoxious, but we got to deal with them.
Okay, I would like to turn this over to the police chief and his staff to give us a presentation of the status on the investigation to this thus far and the Board of Inquiry. Chief Parks.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to advise not only the council again, but the public as to where we are on the three major facets of our investigation. As we've mentioned to you several times before, we have broken this up into three major parts. One, the Board of Inquiry, in which Chief Bostic has chaired this process since about November of last year. He was given a task to look at all of our systems, our personnel issues, to audit the work product of not only Rampart, but department-wide. He also was given the task to look specifically at the management issues in Rampart. That report will be finalized on or before March 1st. We also, at the same time that the Board of Inquiry was working, several months to a year before that, we had a criminal task force that addressed the specific issues of Rafael Perez as it relates to his criminal activity. And just to reemphasize the issue is that this started in April of 1998 with the identification that some narcotics was lost in the system. That investigation caused an audit to go forward, which identified additional narcotics that was traced to Rampart. And about August of '98, Officer Perez was arrested. He subsequently went to trial. After the first trial, it was a hung jury. Subsequently, significant more investigation was done, which identified that he had switched a number of items of narcotics that amounted for a couple of more pounds of narcotics. Once he was confronted with about a 14-year prison sentence, he decided to talk with us about his criminal activity as a Los Angeles police officer. That portion of the investigation will be dealt with by Chief Pomeroy and Commander Schatz, who basically spearheaded that process since then. What we'd like to do is have Chief Bostic give you an overview of the Board of Inquiry, give you the major sections of the committees and subcommittees, the breakdown of a snippet of the recommendations that will be coming out of that report as it relates to that issue, the issues he's identified, and also at the end to cover those issues that will be ongoing beyond the Board of Inquiry.
Thank you. First of all, I need to make some acknowledgments because I think it's important in this process. First of all, working for the Chief of Police in this particular case has truly been an honor for me, and I don't say that lightly because I'm working for a Chief of Police who asked me to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that has been very appreciated in this process because this was a monstrous task. And frankly, I don't have an awful lot of good news in some areas, and it's just appreciated the Chief of Police allows me to share that bad news, and it's the right thing to do, and that needs to be said right up front. I also have appreciated the support of the Los Angeles Police Commission, who allowed us to complete our investigation despite all the outside interference and attempts to not allow us to do a complete investigation. It's been a daunting task. We've had over 200 members of the upper command staff. Every commander, every chief, every captain has been involved in this Board of Rights inquiry process, including well over 200 members of the Los Angeles Police Department for about 4.5 months. We have looked throughout the entire Los Angeles Police Department, and it's been no small task to do that. And anyone who understands the scope of this investigation, time was not the essence. Getting the truth on all the issues was far more important than how fast we could do it. So that's what we attempted to do. I also want to thank Jeff Eglass, the Inspector General, who was an active part of many of our committees and provided us some insights and was involved in the process with us. And most of all, I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Protective League. When we began this investigation, a lot of the interviews, a lot of the investigation that we did involved an awful lot of Bill of Rights issues regarding the officers themselves. And the Los Angeles Police Protective League stepped to the plate right off the bat, offered the services of their legal staff and their defense reps and the delegates themselves, and did absolutely nothing to delay this investigation. So it's appreciated that they understood the gravity of what we were about to undertake. As we started the Board of Inquiry process, the Chief of Police gave us a precept to look into all of the department issues and systems throughout the LAPD. Again, we are not in any way, shape, or form involved in the criminal investigation that's ongoing in Rampart. That's Chief Pomeroy and Commander Dan Schatz. And I recognize that the public often has difficulty recognizing that difference, but it's significant. We did nothing to look at any part of the criminal investigation. We looked at the administrative systems. We looked outside of Rampart because our concern was what's happening in the rest of the city. Clearly, was our mandate. And we looked at the entire Los Angeles Police Department and all of their operating systems, their management systems, all of our specialized divisions, so we could feel more comfortable that we had a handle on what was happening in the LAPD. I can tell you from the very first day of the two detectives briefing all of the chief officers on the LAPD early on in the Perez investigation, that was a day none of us will ever forget. The devastation that we felt that we had crooks amongst us in the LAPD wearing a badge. So we knew the gravity of that task, and as I've said before, and I will say again, we have done everything possible to give you the most thorough possible Board of Inquiry report, and I will report some of the, briefly, some of the findings. The report will be out March 1st in detail, but I'd like to cover some of the things that we looked at because I think it's important for the public to know how much work has been done. The first thing we did is early on we identified a group of officers in which we did that were involved in the Rampart scandal early on, and we did profiles on those officers from the moment their background investigations and their application to the Los Angeles Police Department right up until current day on their background, their work histories, their employment histories. So that was completed. When we went through those officer profiles, it was clear to us that at least 4 of the 12 officers we looked at should have never been hired to be members of the Los Angeles Police Department. And there will be more detail coming in the report that explains that. But clearly there was issues in their background, their previous employment history, their previous arrest records in some cases, that they should have never been hired to be members of the Los Angeles Police Department. We looked at, another committee looked at work product analysis through the Los Angeles Police Department. And we analyzed the work products of all of our specialized units looking for trends. We had a basic template of some of the issues that were occurring in Rampart that should have raised red flags and didn't in the command staff in Rampart. And we compared those throughout the city looking for those same issues. We also did a risk management profile of Rampart Division. And what we were looking for there is we were looking at the command staff and the management structure in Rampart during this scandal and asking the obvious question, how could this happen and no one know about it? And so that is a significant portion of our report. We also looked at all of our department operating systems, and we've looked at the impact of Proposition 13 forward on the ability of the Los Angeles Police Department to manage. And I'll discuss that a little bit when I get into the categories. We looked at our administrative investigations. Outside of the internal affairs investigations within the LAPD, we have 3 other systems: traffic collision review system, pursuit review systems, and use of force review systems. So we did an analysis of that. And frankly, what we found in there is we found in some cases, not a great many cases, but in some cases where people had circumvented the system and reports had not been classified properly. So we have some recommendations to shore up that system, which is critical because the city suffers tremendous liability in all of those areas: use of force, traffic collisions, and pursuits. So it's important that we have the support from the council and the city to shore up that process. We also looked at officer-involved shooting investigation protocols. We're making some recommendations on some changes in the way that we handle that. We also looked at our corruption investigation protocols. When you take on an investigation as large as the Rampart investigation and as the depth of that criminal investigation, it takes a huge toll on the operations of the LAPD. So we've developed a system in the future based upon what we're doing in the current investigation to ensure that we're prepared in the future should we have any other occurrence. Finally, we looked at police integrity systems throughout the world and throughout the country, and we're making some proposals about how to shore up our own both training systems, and most of all, for the first time in the history of the Los Angeles Police Department, we're going to propose that we begin, for lack of a better description, for one that people will understand, sting operations and integrity checks on an ongoing basis in the LAPD. So we're making some pretty broad recommendations, well over 100 that'll come out of the Board of Inquiry report. The first area of significance is testing and screening of police officers. In that area, we found some significant problems in the psychological screening of officers before they come on the job. And in addition to those problems, what made it difficult was the city does not keep the records of those psychological evaluations. So that made it even more difficult for us to pin down those issues. We're making some recommendations regarding polygraphs. We believe that every person that applies for the Los Angeles Police Department should go through a polygraph screening. That is currently not our practice, and we now believe it's critical based upon what we're learning from the Rampart investigations. We also believe that financial checks have to become a regular, ongoing part not only of the hiring process, but from time to time when we assign people to specialized units in the LAPD. There's some disturbing patterns in that should have been identified but couldn't have been because we didn't have that ability. The next category of recommendations in the Board of Inquiry report will be personnel practices. Again, the glaring thing that we found when you look at the risk management systems during that 3 or 4 year period that we designated in Rampart, there were some very clear flags that something was wrong, and people either did not find it or when they did chose not to take action. So it's an issue that the department needs to develop a better system to identify those beyond our current teams process. We have a proposal that's been on the table for, I believe, 2 years for the upgrading of our Teams 2 system, and it's critical that we have the ability to track our risk management systems, and we currently do not have that. Another area is our personnel investigations and management of risk systems. And one of our issues there is we have been asked, even since the Christopher Commission era, to staff the Internal Affairs Division to a level that can handle all outside personnel complaints from citizens. That still has not been funded, still has not occurred, and we believe it's critical, clearly after what we've learned in Rampart, that all outside investigations be handled by Internal Affairs Division, and we currently cannot do that. We believe there needs to be an integrity unit established within Internal Affairs. I've already talked a little bit about that, where we do ongoing operations to ensure the integrity of our officers. What we can do within the LAPD, if people have motive to be crooked and carry the badge, we can't control that. All we can hope to do is eliminate the opportunity for them to exercise that option. So these systems will become critical for us to do that. Under the corruption investigation issues, some of the things we're looking at from that area is developing some protocols within an internal affairs group when the Rampart scandal began to break, it's a tremendous toll on the entire operations of the LAPD, pulling people out of their other assignments to make that work. So we've developed a protocol that will make that much easier, as well as establishing our major case management system within those criminal systems so that we can manage those processes. And what creates the major dilemma in a corruption investigation for the LAPD is we have a one-year statute of limitations on the internal review and the internal decision on whether or not members remain with the LAPD through the Board of Rights process. And by doing the criminal investigation and all the processes that go in there, it clearly hampers our ability to deal administratively with officers as quickly as we normally would, because we have to wait until the criminal investigation is complete. And by the sheer volume and nature and size of this criminal investigation, we're going to be forced to move on some administrative issues before we do the criminal. And that's not good because that impacts the criminal, but that's one of the dilemmas that we have to clean up in our administrative processes to give us the ability to deal with these major cases. In our operational investigations, as we looked around operational controls in our divisions, clearly we've had systems within the LAPD throughout my entire 27-year career, but what the Board of Inquiry found is many of our people aren't following those systems. So that's one of the issues that will come out of our recommendations. The systems were there, the ability to identify the issues and trends that were occurring were there, and one of two things happened: either they ignored it or they were aware of it and didn't do anything about it. So that comes out clearly in the Board of Inquiry report. The other thing we looked at was our specialized units. We went throughout the city. We kind of analyzed what our specialized units were actually doing, and as a result of that, most of our small units, our crash units, our bike units, our narcotics units, and some of our units had lost focus of what their responsibility was in the organization, and many of our units were almost totally focused on narcotics investigations throughout the city. Clearly, that's a significant problem, and we're in the process of developing a special order now that will re-outline special enforcement units throughout the city and give them a much more direct chain of command and responsibility to the watch commanders throughout the city to kind of get those systems back on track. In our anti-corruption inspections and audits, we have another category that we're looking at. One of the things that's happened over the years, after post-Proposition 13 area, there was a dramatic cut in the administrative staffs and the command staffs of the LAPD in an effort to reach budget needs of the city throughout the 80s and the early 90s. Then as the department began to grow, and we've added nearly 3,000 officers to the LAPD, the command staff and the administrative staff did not grow. We do not have the ability to have command and control and to inspect our department. We need the resources to make that happen. So that's a significant part of what will come out of this proposal. The other things that we've looked at is we lost commander positions, we lost chief duty officer positions, and we lost captain positions in divisions at a time when the department was cut that were never added back when the department grew at a very fast rate. Finally, we looked at some job-specific training programs throughout the department. We're looking at systems to develop some skills in our watch commanders and commanding officers that have fallen by the wayside. I've mentioned those. We've had systems for years that have been in place, but some have been neglected, and so we're going to move forward on training. We've already been doing that through the Board of Inquiry process. What's important to remember is a lot of these things have been ongoing, and the chief has implemented a lot of these recommendations already within the operational confines of the department. We're not waiting until the Board of Inquiry report has been done to move on a lot of these issues, and a lot of them have already been implemented. Finally, there are going to be some working committees at the conclusion of the Board of Inquiry report that will continue on. We're going to continue on looking at some things that the Board of Inquiry recognized. First of all, a Board of Inquiry report is not an investigation as far as a personnel investigation that is required for the standards of dealing with discipline issues in the department. So the next major step is we've already given many of the issues that we found that are of concern to the department to internal affairs or to the geographic bureaus to investigate. We've also referred some of what we found back to Chief Pomeroy and his criminal investigation. So that work will continue for some period of time. We also have some subcommittees that will do some work product evaluations throughout the city and is looking at some of our other small units. We decided to move beyond our initial looks at the department based upon some information we found, and we are currently looking at every specialized unit in the city and doing a work product analysis to ensure that we do not have the flags that were evident in Rampart somewhere else in the city. So this is a pretty brief synopsis of some pretty significant issues that will come out of the Board of Inquiry, but on March the 1st, it'll all be made public, including our report.
Thanks, Mike. I'd like to ask Chief Pomeroy and Commander Schatz to give you an overview of the criminal side of the investigation.
We cannot be too specific, of course, in this setting on the findings of the criminal investigation, but to bring some perspective and background to our investigation, it began in April of '98, nearly 2 years ago, and it began as a criminal investigation. We made the conscious decision to proceed in the pursuit of criminals. At that time, the focus was not limited merely to one individual, Rafael Perez. It was directed at several acts or several incidents, including the theft of narcotics, as the Chief has mentioned. Keep in mind, however, that the task force also early on had the David Mack case. As you recall, he is a police officer who was convicted of robbery, bank robbery by federal court, and who currently is in federal prison for that act. Early on, we understood that there was a connection, at least through friendship and work assignment, of some of the officers we were looking at. And although we never identified a clear criminal link between David Mack and Rafael Perez, it's clear that they were friends and that some of the other people that they had in their unit were guilty of acts of misconduct and criminality. Shortly thereafter, the task force also took on the case of officers Ethan Cohan and Brian Hewitt, who, as you may recall, were fired for the mistreatment of officers in the Rampart station. Currently, we have 30 detectives assigned to the criminal investigation, and we have been for some months now in the process of handing off those cases which we believe to be administrative only to Internal Affairs Group. So they have approximately 20 detectives assigned to their investigation. So all told, investigations being conducted as a result of the so-called Rampart scandal or Rampart task force would be approximately 50 officers. Beyond that, I cannot say too much other than to tell you that that even though the task force has focused on Rafael Perez, there are other officers and other acts that we are looking at, although there is not major focus outside of the Rampart division at this time.
Before we open for questions, just give you just a brief overview of the other task force in Internal Affairs. Their primary task is to handle all of the administrative, which is internal misconduct issues that have come out of this investigation, and also they have been tasked with what we consider minor criminal charges. And so we've separated in that fashion because it's our belief that the criminal aspect of this, or the major criminal activities, should garner most of our attention early on. We reported recently, and it's basically through the primary work of the criminal task force, that our number one priority going in was to determine how many cases that Rafael Perez was involved with that had actually put people in prison or in jail improperly or illegally. And the last report that we gave is that by his assessment, that there were 57 cases that he identified after going through a large amount of paperwork, arrest reports, crime reports, that he identified specifically. Those cases required us to go to almost every prison in the state of California and also to a couple of foreign countries to find people, to interview them, to determine their side of the issue. Without their knowledge of what Perez had told us, in all instances, they validated the misconduct and the criminal activity. We have, at this time, believed that from Officer Perez's involvement, and most of this activity was done while he was working with Officer Durden, the 99 suspects were in prison or jailed illegally. And of those 99, we have interviewed over 60 at this time. And we have a list that shows several are out of the country and some we can't find. And it is our judgment, and as we've stated publicly, the absolute necessity that the DA goes forward on writs to remove those people from custody that are still in custody, that recall warrants that were illegally obtained, and also secondarily to remove any conditions and restrictions that have been placed on people because of these arrests. That has been the primary task over the last several months, and as we see in the near future, the DA causing these writs to occur, that has been primarily and almost solely on the effort of Commander Schatz's task force to go out and identify that. As we transition at this time, considerable effort is going to be going into the issues of what Officer Perez and other officers, as we interview them, tell us about their activities and the activities of other officers. The issue, and I think we mentioned it at a previous briefing, of why we were so concerned that someone leaked the 2,000 pages of transcript, is because a couple of things have occurred, in that one, on its face, it clearly limits our ability to investigate many of the issues. It identified officers that were unaware that they were subject of investigation, and it also has jeopardized witnesses who were clearly identified and described that still are in the community that we have had to make an effort to try to protect. And so this is the danger of when there are people who choose to put things in the public domain that are confidential criminal investigations, and we just hope that at the end of this that we will not have people who can't be prosecuted or officers who cannot be terminated or punished because of this information that's been put out. And so basically that gives you a thumbnail sketch of where we are, and again, we put a tremendous amount of resources, not only in the Board of Inquiry, but in the criminal investigation, and because it is such a high priority, we will add other people as leads require and as other issues come to our attention. So we're prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on Ms. Sikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Chief Parks, Chief Bostic, and Chief Pomeroy for giving us that briefing and for actually putting it in the proper context. What has gone on, and clearly I think all around here would agree, that the highest priority is to deal with the criminality that has occurred within the LAPD and to sort that out and get it to the proper agencies, both to the district attorney, the city attorney, and then internally to deal with it. The next level, and I think what has also been revealed, is the intensity and thoroughness of what you have done in terms of the investigation. But we need to put it in the context of what the council did yesterday. And this is just phase one. What now needs to occur is that this report needs to be released and given to the Independent Police Commission to be thoroughly vetted, to be thoroughly analyzed, to assess, one, whether or not the department has adequately gone to every corner that it needs to go to uncover what is necessary, and then I think almost more importantly to determine whether or not the analysis of the conditions and the corrections that you are suggesting, some 100 specific conditions, are the right conditions to deal with the problem. That needs to be done independently. It needs to be done with the public advice and consult and with whatever resources are necessary to have that judgment made. At the same time, having said that, I think there may be some very, very high priority suggestions, conditions that, as you indicated, you are already going to be taking care of and implementing. Similarly, there will be some issues that will come to the council, that will come to the police commission, that can be and should be independently and very quickly initiated. This is going to be a very long process, I think, for us to look at what we need to do and make the corrections in the department, some of which can be done more easily than others, but it's going to need an awful lot of work and assistance by the entire city leadership to pull this together. So I believe that there are many other questions on the members of the council, and I will let that occur at this point.
Mr. Fear.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some specific questions to ask. First, I think that many people reviewing what's been public so far are concerned that the code of silence issues, which were addressed by the Christopher Commission in the light of Rodney King, are still pervasive problems in the department, because at a minimum, the turning of a blind eye to what took place in Rampart, at least what we have heard of so far, suggests that took place, leads us to wonder how pervasive that problem is. Can you speak to the code of silence issue, and in particular address what precisely the department has done to look in other divisions, test, see what evidence either gives you a feeling that this is not a pervasive problem, or what might lead you to conclude that there are, in fact, issues in other divisions? That's my first question. I'm not going to answer all my questions yet. Let me hear from you on that first.
Basically, when we look at the code of silence, and this is something as a term that's been, I think, used and overused, is that it is no more pervasive in LAPD than the general population. The issue is that whether it's a human condition, whether people want to come forward. What we have begun to assess in the department is that on a quarterly basis, we begin to track how many of our major complaints are initiated by our employees, and how many grievances and what the issues are that people are willing to come forward on. We find that in looking at our complaints that we do not find our personnel choosing not to come forward. We do not find them unwilling to be interviewed or to testify in boards of rights against their fellow officers. We're always going to find some officers are reluctant in some fashion, and we deal with that by, if they do not report misconduct, if they are untruthful or not candid, that they become part of the discipline process. But I don't think we'll ever have a situation where we can come here and tell you that the code of silence doesn't exist as long as it exists in the general population.
Well, code of silence, or on broader issues, what precisely have you done or are you doing with respect to other divisions to assess whether the issues that arose in Rampart exist in other places?
Basically, as Chief Bostic says, we have gone through and done a work analysis, work product analysis throughout other divisions, specialized units. One of the committees will go beyond the March 1st deadline to continue looking at all of our special assignments. What we have found in looking at those is that, as a general assessment, that some of the telltale signs of poor reporting, lack of review by supervisors, unawareness of some of the systems exist department-wide. Until we continue the criminal investigation and begin to interview people as to individual acts, we cannot at this time say we have found criminal behavior in other divisions. We have seen in the report products and some of the systems the same failures.
But that's an ongoing matter, that,
Yes, it is.
that assessment. Let me turn to Crash for a second. Again, my time is limited, so just very quickly. Obviously, the issues as to whether Crash as an institution is inherently troubled are also on everybody's minds. Not just Crash at Rampart, but Crash elsewhere. What is your report going to recommend regarding Crash in the future, and what have you found regarding Crash in other divisions that leads to the conclusions you're reaching?
What we have found not just in Crash, but in specialized units in general, is there's a need that we bring them back into the mainstream of reporting through the watch commander, that they become part of the roll call system, that no matter what assignment, whether it's Crash, whether it's narcotics in a divisional level, all of those units have to have some layers of supervision. We've also seen that our redundancy systems in our department, as far as the review at the area, the bureau, and the specialized level, have to be emphasized, and in some places recreated. But what we have sent a clear message is that we will always have a strong gang enforcement strategy in the city. It may not be named Crash in the future, but we'll always have resources addressing the gang problem.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Mr. President, members of the council, Chief, there has been a considerable amount of concern and perhaps some confusion that I trust that you can clarify with respect to one of the initiatives or recommendations, proposals that you have advanced, and if such is the case, we wish to hear about it, namely an integrity package to which there has been a dollar amount attached. It would be useful, I think, for us to hear from you directly as to what that entails, what's intended by that, and to clarify any of the perhaps erroneous information that has been communicated about it to date.
Thank you. Basically, what we have done is assess in the Board of Inquiry all of the major issues that have come to our attention as far as recommendations, and then identifying the recommendations to solve those problems. We've developed what we call an integrity package. What we also went back and looked at is some major budget cuts that occurred in the decade of the 80s and early 90s, where in two specific budget cuts dealing with Prop 13 and then a CAO audit, and then in the late 80s to early 90s, there were in excess of 1,600 to 1,700 positions cut out of the department's budget. Much of them were review, administrative, audit functions that were never replaced. And so in our effort to address some of those concerns, our budget package looked at about 6 major issues. We found, as Chief Bostic said, there's a real need to upgrade the testing and screening process. What we believe is that every candidate that comes in the LAPD needs to be polygraphed. We also believe that there are significant public information systems that are available that you can go to get information on candidates, and in dealing with that whole issue of upgrading our process. We also see in personnel selection that when a candidate lives out of the city or out of the state, we often do not have the resources to send an investigator to their home city to do as thorough an investigation as we do if they're local. And our judgment is that we need to find a way either to have individuals that live in that vicinity that are law enforcement or ex-law enforcement to carry on that responsibility if we can't do it individually. We've also seen some personnel practices that we are concerned with, and in many instances such as crash. They are generally the basic rank officer. We do not get access to them in the sense of people having a willingness to go get upgraded, promoted, and so we often have the youngest officers migrating to those units. And so we're looking to find some balance to where we can put some pay grades, not only in the supervisory positions of crash, but in the officer position. We also have seen, although it was not an issue that deals with the Rampart scandal, we have seen a number of divisions over the last 10 years suffer from lack of supervision and quality of supervision as it relates to our youth services program, and we're looking for some upgrades in that area. We also have seen, as we've talked about, a real need to be much more comprehensive and have a system to make our teams pointer system until Teams 2 is on point, to provide command officers and our internal affairs and our risk management people far more information as it relates to addressing their job. We also believe, and I think many of you are aware, that one of the major recommendations out of Christopher was that we ended up with a situation that the internal affairs process should be decentralized and expanded. And we only accomplished half of that. We've decentralized it to where there's an internal affairs function in every bureau where it's decentrally located, but we've never added the resources to allow the department to have major citizen complaints handled by internal affairs and not the division that is involved. The other issues is that in looking at those personnel areas, we're also looking in the sense of risk management, looking for trend analysis. When we went back and looked at all of the paperwork that was submitted by Rampart, in hindsight, you see tremendous amount of red flags. The tendency in an operational function is to deal with incidents as they occur. We need the ability to go back and look at units that and how they produce issues that may be integrity related or liability related. And then also in looking at issues as a supervision. For years, our formula for supervision was 1 sergeant for every 7 officers. Somewhere in the early 90s, mid-90s, we went to a 1 for 7, a 1 for 8, which reduced at this current time something like would be 80 less sergeants that would be in the field. We think we need to go back to that 1 to 7 ratio. Another major proposal is that we have major crimes and particularly issues that deal with shootings. And it was clear that in Rampart that officers took advantage of the system. They get involved in the shooting. They would then orchestrate the scene before they would call anyone into the scene. It's our judgment that we need to have nighttime, morning watch detectives that are not assigned to divisions that go out and freeze the scene of any major event so that when we roll robbery, homicide, and other detectives, a independent unit is already present and they have locked down the scene before the investigators get there. There are other issues that deal with the, secondary issues of criminalists so that we have the ability to analyze many of these issues that come out of officer-involved shooting reports in which firearms and those things are a hindrance in finding adequate people to deal with those. Those are some of the issues, such as the loss of commanders at a bureau level. Right now, our department's just under 10,000 people. We have less administrative and command officers today than we had when the department was 7,500 people. In a bureau, South Bureau, dealing with 1,600 officers and several hundred civilian employees, we have 2 staff officers that are responsible for the entire administration leading of that bureau. And in each division, with the increase of administrative chores and crime analysis, we have just 2 captains that run those functions. It is humanly impossible in many instances in large commands for 2 people to keep their thumb on all the issues that we're requiring them to deal with. That's a thumbnail of what that package entails. Because of the extensiveness of that package, we've chose to place it over a 5-year period and not put all of these positions in place in 1 year, but to look at it over a 5-year period. We also have looked at, in order to somewhat reduce the overall cost, is to look to upgrade positions where we could versus asking for new positions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mrs. Chick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a couple of categories of questions, but I want to start out with a general comment. I have very vivid memories of asking repeatedly of the department a variety of command staff in our program to expand the number of patrol officers. What about moving the whole line of the department forward together? And as we looked at other big city police departments expanding radically and rapidly, and the history of those expansions and the track record and the problems that occurred in those departments, wasn't it important while we were adding new patrol officers to also look at not just equipment, but the issue of field training officers and sergeants and all the other pieces? In other words, for every 100 officers hired, what were the other things that needed to be put in place? I was pretty much told, don't worry, be happy. And now we're hearing that, in fact, those are real problems, and they're not real problems that were just discovered today. Those were problems that were on the table from the very beginning. To me, this is not a surprise at all that one of the things the department is now recommending is that we need better and more supervision because we have so many young officers without that supervision. In terms of questions, I'm beginning to better understand that the report from the Board of Inquiry is a totally separate report from the criminal investigation. And so I'd like to know, in terms of what's going to the Commission, is it the Board of Inquiry investigation that's basically saying, here are all these things, about $9 million worth, if I'm not mistaken, that the department needs to do differently? What has been the Inspector General's role thus far in both the criminal investigation and the Board of Inquiry investigation? And is what's coming now to the Commission a report that's already been done? Is the Inspector General then going to be left with the role of saying, I see some flaws, I disagree with some of the findings, and then go back and redo the investigation? to see if, in fact, the Inspector General's views are correct. And finally, in terms of the Board of Inquiry versus the criminal investigation, if you could go back, I know that we've heard a little bit about what the department is doing to see department-wide the level, potential level of criminal activity. What exactly is being done now to uncover that, and what information is going to the commission, and what is the Inspector General's role in that?
All right, thank you, Mrs. Chair.
Okay.
Quick response, I think you've given a lot of those answers already.
Okay. As far as the sergeant position, and I think when we look at that, if we go back and look at budgets, you'll find that sergeants were adequately addressed in the sense of 1 for 8, and recently in mid-90s. During the budget process, that was a change made in either, and I don't recall whether it was the mayor's budget or the council's budget, in somewhere in 94, 95, that we went 1 for 8 when we historically had been 1 for 7. That was not a recommendation by the department. Our judgment now is we need to go back to the 1 for 7. The BOI report you accurately assessed is a report that deals with structure, systems, and also addresses about 100-plus recommendations of things we think we need to do. The integrity package is a budget item that is being forwarded, hopefully to get involved in this year's budget to address the first year of what we think we should do in the integrity area. The criminal investigation right now, in looking at, is turning towards those acts by officers other than Perez, and that may be assigned to other divisions. So that's the process that we're moving into at this time. That's the transition. The first several months dealt with Perez and his actions totally. The role of the Inspector General as it relates to the his review of our report, certainly that's something the commission is more appropriate to address when they put together how and what they want this group to do once they assemble it. And that's something that is totally in their purview once we give them the report March the 1st. The involvement of the Inspector General at this point, let me ask Mike, because he's chaired the Board of Inquiry, and he can advise you what that's been.
From the very beginning, the Inspector General was given a schedule of our meetings and attended many of the subcommittee meetings that went on. He also attended a lot of the Board of Inquiry meetings. It was completely open. We never left anything away from him. He has also been reviewing a lot of the reports along the way, so he's been an active part of the process from the beginning. Not the criminal. I can't speak for that. Marty would have to do that. Only the Board of Inquiry.
The criminal investigation has been open at all times to the review of the Inspector General. In fact, he has been invited over a great number of times to view our operations, has been at the Criminal Task Force, and in fact did sit in on, or did monitor, excuse me, one of the debriefings of Officer Perez, or former Officer Perez. Okay. Members, we have to interrupt this for just a few seconds. Mike Hernandez brought in a special one today, and we need to vote on this before 11:45. So, Mike, would you explain this, and that's important, and we'll.
Mr. President,
it's a grant that has to be approved.
Our block grant application that the council already approved for the year 2001 has to be sent out today. And part of the correction that we need to make on the application is we have to substitute the words notice of exemption for a negative declaration. And it's basically asking for us to be able to substitute that process so that we could send out the application today.
Okay, we have to rule
The findings?
on the findings?
Yes, basically, this was just discovered that there was an error yesterday in what the council approved, and since it has to happen immediately.
Okay, prepare the roll on the findings, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Now we have special one before us. Prepare the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Forthwith on that. Okay, can we get that list back up? All right, I think Mr. Wax was, next. We'll go back on this item 27.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of council, I was one of the people who asked that we have this briefing in public
Fewer's already spoken.
because I believe that the process by which an investigation is conducted can be as important as the investigation itself. And that no matter how thorough and how professional an investigation is, people will only believe it if they think that it is fair, open, and independent. I've been dismayed in the past that all of our briefings had been in private, behind closed doors. And even then, Chief Parks, we were never given the information that unfortunately we have to read about the next day in the front page of the LA Times. And I think that there is a history of leaks within the department that should make you especially aware that happens and that you have to deal with that. That said, let me ask you a few specific questions, because probably the question most on everybody's mind is just basically how could a scandal of the magnitude and the seriousness of Rampart go undetected by the top brass in the department for such a long period of time? Or was it detected and simply no one talked about it?
First of all, let me just...
let me ask you two other questions, and then you can answer all three so that I use up my time. I'll just ask you two other questions. Second, in your investigation, did you find any evidence of a culture existing within the department that encouraged the cover-up of this type of behavior? Third, did you have any evidence that Officer Perez, in fact, sought employment with the Chino Police Department but was turned down because he failed the background investigation? And fourth, and lastly, did the department ever implement the Christopher Commission recommendations insofar as rotation of officers with respect to the crash units? And if not, why not?
Let me go through, first of all, let me just comment on the issue of what you've been reading in the newspaper. Those criminal issues that you've been reading about would not be anything that we'd ever brief anybody on until we concluded the investigation. As far as the leaks that are occurring, we're pretty well substantiated. They're not coming out of LAPD because we don't have all of the transcripts that are being leaked. And so first of all, we want to clarify that. The other issue as far as the Rampart scandal, how does it happen and how long? What we've assessed so far is that this appears to have started in somewhere in the 95, 96 time period, at least from what we know now, until about 98. How can it go on is generally a lack of oversight by command, supervision, all the way up through the department. The issue of dealing with it, there's clearly an effort to deal with isolated incidents. People have been disciplined, had been removed for isolated charges. The real issue is that there's no one that put all this together as somewhat of an operational procedure, because until you put all of this on one table and look at what came out of Rampart or came out of Crash, you don't get the real picture. If you look at individual cases, they properly adjudicated the individual cases. As far as cover-up, we've not seen an issue of cover-up. What we have seen generally is, in some instances with the Board of Inquiry, some real supervisory lapses as far as choosing not to pay attention, or even in one instance that we saw that a lieutenant of police giving specific directions to officers not to follow certain legal mandates. But I think what and we don't want to make an error stereotype, but I think you're going to find generally two things at Rampart: overwhelming workload and inattention to important systems and issues. I don't have, first I've heard of Perez and Chino was in a document I saw yesterday. Having reviewed his background profile, I don't recall that, but we can check on it and see, but I don't recall that specific issue. And then the last issue you asked about,
Christopher Commission.
Christopher, we are currently, the last time I reviewed it, have implemented about 80% of the Christopher recommendations, or over 80%. I do not recall Christopher making a recommendation about Crash. I think
no, they made a recommendation regarding rotation of officers, and if that, and had that rotation of officers applied to Crash, would this culture have been allowed to exist this long?
Well, the issue is this, that we have made, since Christopher, several assignments have a limited tour. We have internal affairs, but we've not had a practice in a general field operation of rotating field officers on a routine basis.
In Crash, were they rotated routinely?
Mr. Wax, let him answer the question. Your time is up.
We have not rotated Crash, no. Crash is a fluid group of officers. Because of their tenure, they often leave because they get upgraded to P3s in the basic car. But we do not have a rotation process. That is something we will look at that came out of the Board of Inquiry.
All right, Mr. Burnson.
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank the chief and the chiefs who are here for giving this public briefing. I think it's will do a lot to explain some of the situations, what's going on, and to let everybody know that the chief and his staff are doing everything within their power to bring all the information forward to the public. And I think that's credible, and I have confidence that they will do that. I just want to, I think the important thing is, what has happened is very unfortunate. It has hurt the city, it's hurt the department, it's cast a shadow on all police officers, unfortunately, and I would say that 99 and 9/10% of them are good, honest, hardworking police officers who go out there every day and lay it on the line for us. And unfortunately, this casts a shadow on them also. What I would hope that would come from this is going forward with something positive that will restore the credibility in the department. And hopefully, you mentioned the code of silence. And, you know, I guess that takes place everywhere, as you said. But I would hope that we could work together with the league, with the trainees on the new officers coming in, and with each division. And hopefully what we could instill would be a code of honor to replace any code of silence, that we would let the officers know that when things like that take place, it hurts the whole department. I don't think any officer wants that to happen. So my suggestion is, that's just one little thing, and I know you're doing everything you can, Chief, to try to get to this, but hopefully, if we could get that one little thing started, that every officer thinks in terms of a code of honor for the department, so that restore it to where it really belongs, which it still is the finest department anywhere, in spite of a couple bad apples. Thank you.
Mr. Holden.
Mr. President, members, in response to some of my colleagues, I just want to say that I was not in favor of this public airing of the Rampart situation at this time. I think that at some time, at the appropriate time, once the investigation is completed and screened by the commission, that would have been the time to do it. You have to guard yourself against leaks. And as I speak of leaks, Chief, you said that the department was not in complete control of all the transcripts. Then who else had the transcripts? Give me a quick answer. I got 3 minutes.
The district attorney and the LAPD are the only operations.
So if you did not release, I mean, if your command did not release the transcript, then it had to be the DA's office.
That's our speculation, yes.
Fine. Now that's what we have to be concerned about, because as we gather additional information for the purpose of prosecuting some of these police officers who violate the rights of others, then we can't lose the opportunity to do that if we leak everything. Now, I know some of my colleagues wanted to air everything in public, but you had, today, I think, there's something that was stated off the cuff that'll jeopardize our case. For an example, Chief Bostic, you said that 4 of these officers should not have been hired. Then I've had cases even before me or in the Senate, whichever the case, but I do recollect that they allowed a police officer to carry a weapon and then again ultimately shoot somebody. And when the investigation was completed, it was determined that they never should have had the weapon in the first place, which increased the damages. I mean, we have to be extremely careful about how we guard top secret. Now, the chief, you mentioned just the other day that a number of police officers have been fired since you've been in the job. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many?
We've had approximately 100 officers fired in the last 24 months.
100 officers fired. Then that says they should never have been hired in the first place. But we fired them before they did any damage for the city, obviously and hopefully. So I think that I'm just trying to make that particular point. Now, once again, the fingers are being pointed at the police department, which I resent. There was a big effort on the part, a crash program by members of the council and the mayor to hire 10,000 police officers. I remember very clearly the command officer sitting at that table saying, we can't hire these officers unless we staff up our sergeants and lieutenants and command staff. Very clearly. But the feds were not giving us money for that purpose. They gave us money just to hire additional police officers, and that's what they in fact did. They have a lapse in memory around here. So I say, sure, we need more police officers. It's too bad that we have to have the Rampart situation to cause us to increase our command staff and training officers. That were discussed very vividly. I was clear on that. I got 3 seconds. All right, in closing, I would just say that I think you're doing a good job. I think we got to keep this under lock and key. I think those who reveal information that are top secret, we got to find a way to arrest them. I believe in that because the cities must be protected. The city's right to prosecute those who have violated the rights of others.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. The chair recognizes Councilman Pacheco.
Okay, Chief. I'm not going to let the speculation go to the DA's office, so I'm going to have to follow up with some questions on this. I just can't do it as a former DA. If I remember how depositions are taken, there's at least a court reporter and Mr. Perez's lawyer there.
Yes.
And it's not unheard of court reporters to make a little extra money on the side by sharing their transcripts with people who may not be most beneficial to our efforts, right?
That's true, but in this case, the court reporter is an employee of the DA's office.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying. There's a difference, but my only point is...
Who was your last employer?
My only point is that you can't point to the DA. You may point to an employee of the DA, but you can't point to the...
I didn't point to the DA. I said the only people that we know that have access is the DA's office and our office, and we do not have a full set of those transcripts.
And Officer Perez's attorney?
No.
No.
No, okay. No, well, I'm just asking who's in the room when this is going on.
We have a court reporter, a DA, LAPD detectives, and our information is localized in one file cabinet under lock and key, under the control of a supervisor. We have found out that the DA has made copies for several DAs and has the full set where we do not have a full set. We do not have 2,000 pages of transcript.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we separate the DA from the staff. So, I wanted to ask some questions on, I hope the report will give me some more information in terms of making a nexus with some of the reports you've been giving. When you talk about youngest or younger officers, I don't see a relationship between lack of integrity and a younger officer. So I hope the report will give me some information that solidifies this position, that it means something. To me, a person is honest or is dishonest, and whether they're younger or not, I don't see the correlation at this point, so I will wait for the full report. Also, I'm concerned about, there's been some speculation, some comments in the papers and different people about the lowering of standards. My concern about that is that I believe it's code for people basically saying that since the police department has aggressively hired minorities and women, that this is why we have a problem. And I want to make sure that that is clarified in terms of your position, the police department's position on any sort of speculation about this quote-unquote lowering of standards that I've been reading or hearing about. So hopefully the report will address that. The only other thing I want to bring up is hopefully the report will have a timeline that deals with the criminal, actually we're not going to get a criminal investigation report quite yet. So let me step back and ask you this question then. There was a comment made that gave the impression and the perception that you were actively pursuing criminal investigation on officers in April of '98. My question is, if I understood you right, is those are based on crimes that had occurred, a theft of narcotics and a bank robbery.
Yes.
but the impression that the I think it's the commander next to the left of you,
Chief Pomeroy.
Chief Palmer gave, was that there was a choice made there, that there was some way of making a choice that this could have been an administrative investigation or a criminal investigation in the way he presented the information. So
Well, the issue there is that we had a choice of having internal affairs handle it, or we had a choice of having a task force that dealt with just the criminal aspects of it. And we chose a criminal task force versus having IED handle it. IED handles both phases. They can handle criminal or administrative, but we chose to set up a criminal task force on these issues.
Nick, your time is up.
Oh, can I just ask one last question real
Okay.
quick? In the process that the Inspector General is participating on the Board of Inquiries, does the Inspector General in that process have independent authority to do any of their own follow-up or investigate what's going on, or are they merely there as observers?
Okay. There's 4 questions. Let me go back on the lack of integrity versus younger officers. We don't want to leave you with a misimpression. We're not saying that. What we're saying is younger officers with less experience has a tendency to not know as much as more senior officers, and often are victimized by the system or their lack of awareness. It's not saying that they're more corrupt or that they are less honest. What we have found is that the officers that we're dealing with were hired, most of them in the area of 88, 89, 90, which would give them at least a decade on the department. When we look at major misconduct in the department, the first major spike is at 7 to 8 years. It's not on for major misconduct, it's not on the officers on probation or before that. Lowering the standards, that's not anything that we as a department have said. What we have seen is that not complying with standards as it relates to looking at someone that may have had prior arrest or red flags that were hired when our standards said they shouldn't, but there's not been a lowering of standards, even no matter when we've had an increase of hiring or a lessening of hiring. Let's see, independence, basically the ground rules that we set up with the Inspector General's involvement in our Board of Inquiry, because it was always considered that he would be in the reviewing aspect at the commission, is he was there as a monitor, someone that could evaluate what we're doing and suggest alternatives and courses of action. There was never an intention for him to take an active role or do independent investigations.
Okay. Ms. Goldberg?
Yes, thank you. I think probably the thing that, the context that disturbs me the most for all of this is the crash context. And that is that we have people we now know who are wearing tattoos, who had gang initiation type rituals that were police officers, who had award plaques for shootings and things like that were police officers. And I guess the question that the public, as it talks to me, wants to know, besides how could you have missed all of that, not you personally, but the department missed all of that, is how can you convince us it's not happening in other divisions? I think I mentioned to you privately, but I will say it publicly, I am in a campaign where I'm knocking on doors. And I get told by people, and this is not in the Rampart area, they do not believe that this is the only place this type of thing is happening. Now, in some fashion or another, we have to come to grips with that belief is out there. And what they're basically saying to me is that the presumption of innocence has disappeared. That by virtue of being a certain socioeconomic group, a certain age, and a certain race or ethnicity, that it is assumed by LAPD that you are guilty. How do we tell people, how does this investigation, either the ones that Schatz and Pomeroy did or Bostic, how do we convince people that that presumption of innocence has not disappeared? By the way, it's not just LAPD, they say this presumption of innocence has disappeared. They think it's gone in the courts too. They think judges and district attorneys no longer assume that you're innocent until you're proven guilty if you fit a certain profile. So I don't just see this as an issue of LAPD, but the whole criminal justice system. And so the question I have, and it's really the only question I have, is because there's some relationship between some of the people in Rampart and other divisions. They worked other places. How are we so convinced that focusing on Rampart is really the end of the story?
Okay. Basically, and repeat it again, is that we've not said that. We said we are starting at Rampart. We have looked at Rampart. We've looked at the work product of other areas, and we have telltale signs of their deterioration of work. We have yet to go out and verify a lot of those things that Perez has said about other officers. That's where we are now.
How long before you feel like you'll have a handle on some of the other places this may lead, so that people will know that this is ongoing? Because one of the downsides of the report is that people believe it's over. And that's why I think I'm getting the response I'm getting from people talking to me.
Well, two things are happening. One, clearly in the report, it will show several committees will continue to work beyond March 1st. As our investigation on the criminal continues and you see filings or administrative charges, will show what's going to, but we won't be able to get a timeline because the leads will take us certain places. The one timeline we have is we must get all administrative charges done within a year. So that's the one timeline. But it's from the year of our knowledge. So as people give us new information, we have timelines that are individual. The other thing is, again, on the belief versus the investigation. You know, one of the things that we'd hope, and I think it was brought out in the Daily News editorial, is that we're the only ones looking at our department, but yet 3/4 of it is in the county. And we'd hope that maybe through some suggestions from this body, that maybe the public defender and the probation and the DA and the judges, all that are county agencies, might want to look at their operation as thoroughly as we're looking at ours.
Mr. Hernandez?
I guess, Commander Bostic, when was Perez hired?
I think it was 89.
1989.
89, 90.
89, 90, okay. And members of the council, I shared with some people that I've learned sometimes I keep on going through the cycle, and I was one of the council members elected right after Rodney King, and we had to deal with the Christopher Commission recommendations, and at that time we talked about a code of silence, and we've had several cases of police abuse that we were trying to deal with, and we've always had certain responses from the department. Now, since I was elected in '91, what I do realize is I've operated under 4 chiefs. Chief Gate, an acting chief, Chief Willie Williams, and now Chief Parks. And when we talk about these profiles of the officers, the statement was made that 4 should not have been hired, but 8 were hired under the system. And what was made that profile different from the 4 who should not have been hired? That's one of my questions that I think has to be answered, because now we're talking about 12 officers that we did a profile on, but my understanding this is expanding beyond that. Chief, I knew you primarily as the Central Bureau Chief who oversaw Rampart. And I always felt that Rampart had an overwhelming workload, and I was always fighting for resources for Rampart. But at the same time, I thought Rampart was different than the other 5 divisions that also serviced my council district. And I kept on bringing up those differences. And this is the first time I'm hearing publicly that you felt Rampart was different from the rest of the divisions. And I think that that's something that's real key that we look at, because the crash officers and the whole issue of homicides and the crime rate that was going on there, it was a whole different working environment. And how people survive there in that working environment, because I kept on asking, why do we keep on changing captains at Rampart? How many people are getting promoted at Rampart? And it was like part of the department's policy is for people to get promoted into another level, they had to have another assignment, so we would move them. And so I felt that Rampart, compared to some of my other divisions, did not have the stability that I was seeing in other areas, and I was asking those kinds of questions. I'm concerned about the sergeants and the command staff, and what is the profile that we're finding there as to why they might have contributed to the problem of what you now perceive as not a major problem in terms of a code of silence. I think the code of silence is there. I mean, we're finding that out. It's been something we've been dealing with at least since I've been on this council, and it allowed for this to fester. So are we doing that kind of review of our command staff, of our supervisory staff? How is it that they contribute to this problem? And my real concerns in listening to your report is reality. This year's budget, next year's budget will be strained so much by the lawsuits in terms of our decision-making. I don't know where the money comes to do some of the things you're recommending. And how is it that we're going to be able to accomplish the task before us, knowing that the department right now is the largest percentage of our city budget? Where is it within the department resources that we're going to deal with some of these issues? I think that's going to be part of what we need to be seeing in order for us to figure out how we find additional resources for you.
Okay. To respond, basically, when you ask about the differences between those hired and not hired, is that we found some issues in people's backgrounds, such as prior arrests, poor debts, inability to handle their finances, that were not in the other people's background. That's why the statement was made. Those were indications that in some instances were basically a decline to hire by the department. Appeals allowed them back on the list, and they subsequently were hired. That the issue of Rampart in the sense of being different, I think that ever since Rampart was put in place, and that's in the late 60s, it's been considered different in the fact that we ended up with probably what we consider to call often the most violent 10 square miles of the city. And during my tenure at Central Bureau, at one time, I think one year we had 170-some murders in one year. We actually had to close down the Rampart homicide unit in order to allow the rest of the Bureau to absorb it. So there's always been special consideration. In fact, as unintended consequences, Rampart, because of the overwhelming workload and the increased resources in that division, is why we made a decision to put part of their division in an off-site location. So causing them to have more workspace and then correspondingly not having the proper supervision is the reason why the crash unit was independent, off-site, and many of these issues that the Jimenez case and Hewitt case where he was beat was off-site, out of the eye of the watch commander. The turnover, it's been a significant turnover, and it's been a significant turnover since my tenure, because one of the dilemmas we have is often in major commands, such as Rampart or Hollywood or Van Nuys, you try to pick what you have as your absolute best captains available, and when you pick the best, they often get promoted, and so they move on. You generally do not find them being moved to other lateral assignments. They generally become commanders, and so that's been a problem there. Sergeant and supervisors, you will see as part of the Board of Inquiry a significant analysis of every supervisor that's worked in Rampart over 5 years and their assessment of what was going on there and a profile of the supervisory issues in that command. The issue of money on the budget, it's our consideration and understanding that the city's going to be in dire budget straits, but I think what we will see also in the Board of Inquiry is the 10-year history of budget cuts that now puts us in a situation where the liability is substantial. And I think what our effort to reduce the cost is upgrading the positions versus asking for new positions, which is significantly a lesser total net increase than is saying we wanted 200 net officers. And the final one on the corrupt officer issue, or the issue of code of silence, I think what we see now is we have an issue that we have some corrupt police officers. And if they made a decision for personal dishonesty, it should not be labeled as code of silence. They're just corrupt, and they found other corrupt officers to work with. And I think that's what we're about, trying to figure out what and why that went on. At the same time, punish those that are involved.
Okay, Mr. Fuhr for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, listening to the conversation, responses to Ms. Chick's questions, other statements by the chief regarding the importance of additional supervisorial positions, the responses to Mr. Hernandez's questions, I'm going to recommend that we ask the CLA, the CAO, and the mayor's office to work with our Public Safety Committee and the Budget Committee and see if we can get the federal government to allow us to use the COPS hire money for not merely patrol officers, but also supervisorial staff. Because it's clear to us, as we're listening to this conversation, that we have dual needs. More officers on the street, but we have to get the back room in order. And I think that's a worthy effort for us to try to explore, and we'll work as a team to try to achieve that. I think it's worthwhile, just in the chief's reaction to that. In addition, a couple specific questions. First, in the paper, it's been reported that, and this is for Chief Pomeroy, that 70 or so officers are being investigated criminally. With respect to the individual names, don't want to know them. Allegations, don't want to know them. But in terms of the scope of officers who are being investigated, what's the number?
I'm going to let Dan Schatz answer that one, Councilman.
And Mr. Holden's recommending we not know that information publicly and already spoke against having this whole hearing in public. I think that the general information, what is the scope of the problem that we're considering, what's the snapshot right now, recognizing that it might change, is very important public information, as is all this discussion.
Okay, let me just comment on that. Number one, I can tell you categorically, at this moment, we do not have 70 officers under criminal investigation. What was referred to in that news article, which was misinterpreted, is that Perez, early on in his comments, and if you read the scenarios as they go forward, he gave a global and general view of what he thought the involvement, and he used terms like every officer working crash or every crash unit. As he proceeded through the 20 chapters of the report and was nailed down specifically, he began to be more specific and found that it was not nearly those numbers. And what that 70 represents is every name he mentioned. And they're from rumors.
Got it. What is the number? Nothing else, just the raw number of officers at this moment who you think may be implicated in some wrongdoing.
Well, that's a floating figure. I can't comment on that. I think the issue is we have had more than sufficient information about the criminal aspects that are in the public domain that hampers our investigation.
You think that information would hamper the investigation?
We would not like to deal with that, no.
All right. Well, I think that it's useful for us in closed session to get that information, but if you believe that's going to jeopardize things openly, so be it. Let's continue. There has been, Chief, you yourself have said that you believe 99 cases,
99 suspects.
99 suspects may have been wrongfully implicated in 57 cases, I believe.
57 cases, 99 suspects.
Right. There's also a number, 12,000, that's been floating around, of cases that may on some level have been tainted. Can you explain the difference between that number, what that number means, and the 57 cases which you yourself have identified?
Mike, you can sit down now because your time is up.
57 cases are cases in which Perez has personally identified that were perjured and that were false arrests. The 12,000 is a figure that's come from a couple of sources. One, the Attorney Yagman asked the DA for all of the cases and names in which all of these officers' names may be in place or been involved with. The DA gave them about a decade of information, which includes all of these officers' names and all of their partners' names, and that's where the representation of this several thousand comes from that he claimed that he was going to put on his internet. That is by no means the depth and breadth of what we're looking into. Those are just names and cases that represent officers' activities over a decade.
Thank you.
I think he said yesterday he had 17,000.
Yeah.
It's a list of clients.
Yeah.
Hey, at $5 a shot, you make money that way, man.
Mrs. Chick?
Yes, no more questions, but another comment, and I think one of the persons at the table was very, very involved in a positive way in this, and that's Commander Schatz? Okay, I'm either demoting or promoting people with titles. Colleagues, I just want to remind you of something in terms of this whole discussion of being careful about who the LAPD hires, being careful about not lowering standards, and being careful about background checks. You'll all remember the whole issue of absorbing MTA officers. Unfortunately, I still have probably some black and blue marks on that one, and I certainly know that our former Inspector General, Catherine Mader, does, and thank heavens for her support and involvement, and Commander Schatz's, because at the beginning of that process, we were being urged by the department, by the mayor's office and others, that all of these officers were highly qualified officers and were worthy of taking into LAPD. And when your Public Safety Committee, Inspector General, and a few very worthy members of the police department joined together to impose the same background check on those officers that we do on our own, we eliminated, I forget the exact number, it might have been up to 1/3. And I'm very sorry to share with you also that the then acting chief of police, not once, but twice, approached me privately and asked me, wouldn't I reconsider and support the idea of accepting a few of those officers who, after all, had only used marijuana in their youth many years ago. My response to that question was, are you recommending changing the policy for the whole department? The answer was no, and the discussion went away, and those officers happily were turned down. So I couldn't agree more with Chief Parks in terms of needing to maintain our standards, doing careful background checks, but I also think that we, in our quest for increasing the number of officers in our department, increasing our jurisdiction, need to remember from a political standpoint that we must never, ever consider encouraging the department to do otherwise.
Thank you. Chief, let me remind my colleagues, when I was a police commissioner, some of them weren't even born, but there was a program that was put on one night, and I think it was Channel 4, I'm not positive, it was so long ago, that called it the 25th Man. And I guess we got to say person now, but the 25th man, and it was indicated that out of 25 applications, the police department would get one person. And you might have been that one person that they got, Chief, because you've been there a long time.
That's right.
But that's how strict it used to be, and I don't know what the percentage is now.
You know, the thing is, it's roughly about the same. They estimate for every 100 people that take the exam, you get about 4 or 5 people in the academy. So that's why that effort to recruit is so significant and keeping people in the pipeline.
All right, Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Mr. President, members of the council, I believe strongly that there is value in appropriate public discussion of such matters, and obviously all of us do as well, at least to some extent, and I might stipulate that the vast majority of us do. I think there's great value in what has been accomplished today in this session, the forthrightness of Chief Parks and his staff, and the extent to which it is deemed inappropriate to answer some of the questions that may have been posed in a more direct and thorough manner. I think judgment needs to be exercised at that point as well. I rise simply to suggest that this shouldn't be an isolated opportunity to communicate to the council and to the public. And my view is this format of communication has an educative value that makes for a higher level of confidence in what is going on and what should go on with respect to rooting out the absolutely incomprehensible behavior that has been identified and continues to be disclosed as we probe even more deeply. And so I would trust that the council in its entirety would set forth appropriately scheduled report backs in open session of this matter. I wish not to state in specific terms, Mr. President, members of the council, when that should be the case, but it is something very, very damaging about the reports being disclosed in the newspapers, on the television, and we have to react to that. I think it's just simply better that we have regularly scheduled opportunities for the department and whoever else, the Inspector General, to report to us in open session, that which is reasonable, so that the clarification of issues is before us. There is no confusion, there's no rumors, there's no misinformation. And I, to the extent that that is deemed appropriate, I'd be inclined to move that so that a second could be enjoyed and we could make it a clear pattern of behavior that we would move in this direction for the benefit of all who are concerned. And I would so move, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. Wax.
I would certainly support Mr. Ridley Thomas's, when the chief sort of gave an intimation where the leak came from, I would believe him. He wouldn't have said it if he didn't feel that way. But I've been here long enough to know that everything else always gets leaked too. I mean, countlessly. I mean, I remember the discussions over the last chief. Virtually everything appeared in the paper before many of us knew about it. So I just think it's something that you have to know goes on, and even in cases where only the department is involved. Let me clear up a couple of points, because Ms. Chick well points out, and I think she really stood above everybody in terms of pointing out the dangers of a buildup that wasn't a buildup of an entire system rather than just an aspect of it that was visible and popular. But the press has tended to focus on the buildup that has occurred, the last buildup that has occurred in the 90s. And I understood you to say, when you were here in a closed-door briefing, that the concern goes back to, in fact, the buildups that took place in the late 80s, and that some of the officers that we're now talking about were officers that were hired at that time, as opposed to officers who came in on the buildup from 93 forward. Is that true? I want that clarified, because I think it's important that that be out there as to where this system, where this goes back to.
Most of these officers were hired in the late 80s, early 90s, and we have pretty well can validate that all of them that we're currently looking at were in the process for hiring before the public safety plan.
Okay, and that's pretty interesting, because I remember a chief that goes back to then who wouldn't say it publicly, but he would say, don't give me any more, I can't handle them all, give me instead better forensic, better laboratory, better super, give me everything I need. But that chief would never have said that, and there was another political war going on at that time in the late 80s of build up the department at any cost, and it's kind of interesting. So I think it's just important in terms of not having this come under the political cloud of this being just something of a recent buildup, because I thought I did understand you to say that this goes back. That said, I think Ms. Chick is well to point out that it has continued without correction, and that when she raised it, they were all ready to jump down on her. And I remember distinctly the battles over bringing in the MTA officers, because I had joined her in that. And that goes to the whole thing. There's nothing to be afraid of. Say it, do it, be out in the open. I mean, it all comes down to what Ms. Goldberg raised, where I was leading to, and I was more ginger than she was. You know, it's in the end, it's going to come down to how can you convince us? How can you convince the people of the city of Los Angeles? How can you convince them that you didn't know about it? How can you convince them that it's nowhere else? And the best way to convince people is to do it openly, publicly. Nate, I understand your concern from a legal standpoint, but believe me, those lawyers get it anyway. But from the standpoint of public perception and restoring public confidence, doing this openly, doing this regularly, standing up, answering the questions is absolutely the best thing you can do.
Thank you, Mr. Wax. Mr. Holden.
Right on point, Mr. Wax. Everything that's been discussed today, except for the 4 police officers, has been read in the newspaper anyway, so it's nothing new. And they can't tell you anything new. In fact, the question was asked by Mr. Fuhrer, and he didn't get an answer because it's top secret, confidential. You know, I come from a generation where they say, a slip of the lip sinks a ship. And many people around here don't even know what that really meant.
That's World War I, wasn't it?
But I got to tell you, there's a reason why we have classified documents. It's a reason why we have top secrets. In the aerospace industry, some people have lost their life because they've leaked classified information. They've been in prison for long periods of time because they leaked classified information. This is classified information, and so should be categorized. Chief, I would not going to need a motion for this, but you do have some concerns as the police commission, as we do, about leaks of transcript or classified information, top secret. I would suggest that all parties, including the DA's office, who come in contact or handle these documents, have a task force set up and discuss how you reveal information even to members of the council. You've got to put a lid on this, otherwise your criminal investigation is going to be jeopardized for prosecution. Now, you know from time to time we have classified information right here in the city council. But they don't even trust some members of the city council. Once the closed sessions are over, you come take the information away from them, knowing in advance that at least some of them attempted to leak it. And what they usually leak, they don't get right. They just talk about what they thought they remembered, but they don't have the document in their hands. And there's a reason for that. Because you can't trust them to have that kind of information. Nor can you trust everybody. Some people, for their own personal gain, want to make this information public. They want to have the public attacking the police department. I think you've done a good job, in my view, with this investigation and keeping a lid on it to the best of your ability. But nobody's saying that. But I want you to know that I am. The public out there is saying it. I talked to a lady last night who says, leave the chief's investigation alone. And they were talking about some of the members of the council. So, in my last 7 seconds, carry on.
Mr. Pacheco.
I wanted to distinguish between the criminal investigation and the Board of Inquiries, and I agree with Mr. Holden that I think you're doing a great job with keeping the criminal investigation under wraps as best of your ability. And it's unfortunate that the only persons that are being hurt by the disclosure of that information is our ability to prosecute criminals in the sense of those who use the badge illegally. Because the individuals who are being released warrant the release, so that's going to happen. But our ability to prosecute these bad officers is being undermined by all these leaks of information, and I think it's unfortunate because that only hurts our effort to deal with this problem. On the Board of Inquiry report, which I'm primarily focusing in on because I think systematically that's the most important thing for our future, will I have case studies broken down in terms of how the systems failed us and examples in terms of actually looking at a case study and saying, in this scenario, this system was in place, it failed us, our analysis points to this corrective measure? That's one question. And I wanted you to give me a little clarity on what you meant on this is not seen as an issue of cover-up. When the question was asked, did you interpret it to mean that it was the supervising officers who are participating in a cover-up? Because we know for a fact that the individuals actually involved in the criminal conduct were doing the cover-up. So I just want to understand how you understood the question and just give me some clarity on your response.
Okay. On the first one, you will get some information on case studies and risk management, but it will be absent personnel information. The other issue is that on cover-up, what my understanding of the question was is that would we have instances in which people found out about it and tried to make it go away? We found in instances where people actually, supervisors actually participated in some of the criminal acts. But if we can believe the story in the paper that Perez clearly stated that the people in the loop diverted anyone that was not in the loop away from the case, including command officers, we have not seen at this point a command officer being aware of criminal conduct or participating and saying, I'm not going to report it or investigate it. We haven't seen that.
You know, and I want to cover another issue that I forgot on the Board of Inquiry report that's pretty critical at this juncture, because the question always comes, how can only a few know? Two major issues in Rampart that were incredibly significant. First was the off-site location of the second location that Crash was working out of in Rampart. They worked pretty much on their own, with the only supervisor paying any attention to them was the sergeant in charge of Crash. That was a problem. That will come out. That's clear. The other significant problem is Rampart was on the 312 program. And during that period of time, I was the chief of Operations West Bureau and had 3 divisions on the 312. And frankly, I was nervous the whole time, just for this very issue. When you have it broken up into 312 components and platoons, the command and control and the supervision is completely lacking. You cannot effectively manage under the 312 program under our current structure and the current limitations of our staff and command officers. And in this case, you had 1 supervisor, maybe 2 at the most, on any given time in charge of that unit on a 312, working when they wanted under his guise, and in some cases, no supervisor at all when he took a day off. That was very problematic. The other thing that adds to that is we created a patrol bonus program that makes it nearly impossible for us to get our best qualified people into the most significant operations of the department. They want to work patrol for the patrol bonus. So the 312 and the patrol bonus, in addition to the off-site location, were critical failures in the system for the LAPD.
Ms. Miskowski?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think all the members of the council have asked very, very appropriate questions and helped to highlight some of the issues today. Although this has not been pleasant, I think it's been necessary, and I think it has been healthy to have this process in the open. And I think the motion by Mr. Ridley Thomas and seconded by members here to have a regular update and status in public is going to be good for all of us and for the system. Much of the information we have heard today is disturbing, shocking, and serves as a cautionary warning about the corrupting power of secrecy, the danger of special elite groups, and perhaps, moreover, the overwhelming need to monitor closely the activities of our police organization with a clear, determined management as well as a clear civilian oversight. We are embarking on that now. I thank the members of the department who are here today, and we again are just beginning this review in terms of the public oversight, the public reaction, and the things that we need to change, both recommended by the department and recommended by that civilian oversight, to make sure that this never happens again. And we will bring this back to the council on a regular basis.
Yeah, I will be in contact with the chief when he feels that we do this every so often, and yeah.
Mr. President, thank you. That's applicable also to the extent that it's deemed appropriate for the Inspector General to come and make his presentation to us, because I don't know that has happened, and it would seem to me to be useful for the public to benefit from that as well.
Okay. Chief?
Yeah. I would just like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here and share what we can with you, and really, I think publicly commend the LA police officers that are putting forth double shifts trying to bring this to a conclusion and investigating issues within the department that are not, in many instances, things they like to see, but clearly seeing that the necessity of leaving no stone unturned as it relates to this issue. And I think those are a group of officers, the 40-plus that's in Commander's shop and the 20, 30-plus in IED that are unsung heroes in this, and also the 200 people that were part of the Board of Inquiry that kept doing their job. These issues were not putting their job aside. This is where they are doing their job and then still working on the Board of Inquiry. And we just would like to publicly commend them for what they've done for LAPD.
Okay. Okay. Then there's thanks for the report. We want to thank Chief Parks, Bostic, and Pomeroy. Thank you very much. Mr. Ridley Thomas, I've never met the Inspector General. He hasn't had the courtesy to come over and say hello to me.
Mr. President,
so
may I then suggest that
I would like to meet him sometime.
Yes, well, may I then suggest that we, by way of motion, if it's necessary, to invite him over to make a presentation? The Inspector General.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Fine. All right, then. Thank you very much. All right, the next item.
Item number 32, called special by Councilmember Holden.
Mr. Holden.
Mr. President, I'm coming up over here. Mr. President?
On 32, Mr. President? Yeah, we had a discussion, was it last week, where we got...
Wait, Mr. Holden, I want to give everybody, your attention, so would the television people please leave the council chamber? We were nice enough to give you the ideal position, so at least show a little courtesy and get yourselves out of here. I would have said something else if it were... All right, Mr. Holden, I want to hear everything you say.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very kind. LAFCO is looking at this city separating, and I think the city attorney was here last week discussing under what terms and conditions are we were legally authorized to give them the money. Was that resolved, Mr. CLA, Mr. Deaton? No, they left, nothing was resolved.
Two things. One, the issue relative that you're speaking of has to do with the study for the studies of the reorganization of the San Fernando Valley and the harbor. This is actually, under state law, our requirements to reimburse LAFCO for ongoing cost. And there was because of some additional costs that LAFCO had to go through, there was a bifurcation of the bill, and this is the remaining dollars. And city staff, including the city attorney, CLA, and the CAO, all believe that we should proceed and pay this bill.
So this is
a separate issue.
No?
Yes.
Didn't we vote to give them this amount of money? Yes or no?
No, we did not. We voted to give them $242,000, as I recall.
Is this a portion of it, this part of it?
But that $242,000 includes monies for the support of the study relative to the reorganization of the San Fernando Valley
This part of
harbor.
the money is what I'm saying.
And this part of the money has nothing to do with it. This is the ongoing cost of LAFCO and their functions relative to normal annexations and other studies countywide. Under state law.
Countywide? We have to give money for county also?
Under state law, I don't know who was senator then, but under state law, there's a law that requires us to do that.
Really? Not to hold them, it was Knoxville, if anything.
Are there any other council members who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you open the roll, tabulate the vote?
13 ayes.
That item is approved forthwith. Next item.
Item number 34, called special by Councilmember Holden.
Chair recognizes Mr. Holden. If you would push your button, Mr. Holden, so we can...
No, I think they're going to come up and give a report, then I'll push my button.
That would be fine. May we have staff come forward on item number 34, please?
One through 7, they should address each of those, Mr. President.
If we may have a brief staff presentation on item number 34, hopefully your presentation will answer most of the questions, and then we will recognize council members. If there's any council member that would like to speak on item number 34, excuse me, I would appreciate if you would push your button at this time. Staff, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm Bob Camus with the Department of Transportation. Before you today is a recommendation for an increase in private non-emergency ambulance service in the city of Los Angeles. This increase has been considered by the Board of Transportation Commissioners and by your Transportation Committee.
Could you speak a little louder? Can you give me a little more volume over there?
And it received a unanimous recommendation from both of those bodies. In addition, the committee attached an amendment to the board's report which would exempt those persons who are on the Medicare program and on the city's Lifeline program from the 20% copayment associated with Medicare. The ambulance industry representatives that were present at the Commission's meeting expressed their legal opinion that there's an issue as to whether the Council Committee's intent to exempt the copayment might violate the federal anti-kickback statute or other Medicare laws. They suggested an approach where the city could secure approval from the federal officials. The Transportation Commission authorized staff to work with the city attorney and the ambulance industry to seek legal approval from the Office of the Inspector General of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, who has jurisdiction over the Medicare program. We are pursuing that currently and would like to report back to the council committee and the council with the progress. With that, we urge approval of the increase in rates for the private ambulance industry.
Mr. President, members, Mr. President and I are familiar with this type of issue. In fact, somebody made some false statements about us as relates to ambulance services years ago. And I must tell you, you got an increase, but the increase lasts from 1990 through 1995, which is okay. And then, of course, in 1996, you got another one, which lasts up until the present day, 1999. Well, it's okay. Compared to the other rates in the area, I think that's all right, what you might be doing today. But here's a little sneaky trick. And paragraph 6 of your proposal, you talked about CPIs, which is now you're going to get it every year. Not, before you were getting increases, it took about 5 years, another 5 years. Now you're suggesting that there'll be an increase every single year. On top of the increase, which the county may not be charging, and that is you want to include in it mileage, night services, use of oxygen, emergency calls, waiting time, report search finding. Wait a minute, waiting time? How much are they going to charge per waiting time? Will that come back to the commission as well? But what I'm saying is that could very well put us over what the county is charging, other cities that are providing similar service in the area. Did the county add to their basic charge, whether it be for the advanced life support or the basic life support, these other services?
Yes, they do. The county...
they add on to this $295?
The county upgrades its rates every other year.
I understand that. What I'm saying, we could add increases from $170 to $247, fine. I'll go along with that. But now you want to do it every year. In addition, I don't know what these other charges are, starting July year 2000, that you're going to recommend.
Your Transportation Committee has asked us to review the special charges that are in the current ambulance rate ordinance and report back as to whether we think there should be an increase granted for all of those special charges. There is not currently. The only recommendation that is being made to this council is for an increase in the basic life support and in the advanced life support
which I will support.
Rates.
I will support that.
There is no current recommendation for an increase in rates in any of the special charges.
So the special, Mr. Savornich, the special charges will come back to you and may or may not be approved. Is that correct?
It will have to go to the commission first.
I understand that. But then before that, it'll come to you. The commission is inclined to incorporate those basic charges, which have not been done. We have never done that before. And now my question is,
your question is what?
Will it come back to you?
Yeah.
And you scrutinize that?
Yeah. Mr. Savornich, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. As chair of the committee that took a look at this issue, Mr. Hernandez was also present. Mr. Burnson might have been present for part of the time, maybe all the time, I'm not sure. But one of the things to which concerned us was the quality of ambulance service, first and foremost in the city of Los Angeles. And we all know, as with anything in life, you get what you pay for. And one of the things that we determined that by our doing not a couple of things over the course of many years is, number one, we felt it was important to make an adjustment in regards to the ambulance services that are being provided out there now. Number two, that it would be prudent for the city to adopt some type of consumer price index on the ambulance service so we would not fall behind in regards to the quality of ambulance service care that we provide in the private sector, that it should not go for many, many years, because, of course, if we want to ensure that those persons in our city that are transported by private ambulance service, they have the best type of equipment, the best type of care, the best type of personnel in order to have to be able to reap the benefits of that service. Next, we wanted to make sure that in the providing of these services, that the funding gap, either for the Lifeline customer or for the customer that could not pay the entire rate, that there could be some provision that Mr. Burnson brought in, and those fees would be taken care of, that gap funding, and that was taken care of. And finally, Mr. President, members of the council, one of the other most critical issues was that as we took a look at the revenue that the city has been losing over the period of many years, because most of the cost in regards to the private ambulance fees, that is recouped either through Medicare or insurance plans or other services, that we were doing the people of this city an injustice in regards to not taking a look at the fees. Finally, as it was testified in committee by the ambulance providers, these rates do not go into effect, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, until the amount of funding, the amount that we are bringing the funding up to is approved in regards to what a copay or a payment would be from Medicare or Social Security or any of those other providers. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, Mr. Holden, I think that the Transportation Commission, and we had 3 commissioners come to the committee to testify, if I'm correct, Mr. Hernandez, that said they took a look at this for over the course of the last year and felt that some of the extra charges that you mentioned, Mr. Holden, should come back after a more thorough review when we take a look at the price index increase or not increase sometime in July. So as staff presented, we have just the increase before us today. This has been a while overdue, but I think it goes a long way to make sure that persons utilizing private ambulance services in the city of Los Angeles will continue to receive the degree of care that they deserve.
Just on your time, this would not trigger until such time.
He doesn't have any more time, Mr. Holden.
He doesn't have any time left?
No, he doesn't. First of all, when was the last time the rates were increased?
There was an interim increase granted by council in 1996, and
1996.
prior to that, it was 1991.
Who was the chair of the committee at that time? If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Mr. Holden. So, Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Mr. President, at the request of the chairman of the Transportation Committee, who's otherwise occupied at this moment, I move the previous question on the entire matter.
Okay, there's no one else wants to be heard, so the previous question. So prepare the roll on item 34. Tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Now, forthwith on that. Next item.
Next item, Mr. President, you have motions for posting and referral.
If there's no objections, unanimous vote. We are going to go into executive session, though all those not involved with the executive session, please leave the council chamber.
And you have 2 requests for excuse on the desk. Councilmember Ridley Thomas requests to be excused Friday, March 3rd, to arrive at 11 a.m. for city business, meets council policy.
Unanimous vote.
And Councilmember Wax requests to be excused Tuesday, March 7th and Tuesday, March 21st, personal business, meets council policy.
Who is that?
Councilmember Wax.
Unanimous vote.
The desk is clear for closed session.
Sergeant, would you, Okay, we're back in open session. So, Mr. Fuhrer, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we unanimously adopt the proposed settlement in the Kimball litigation.
Okay, prepare the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item.
That closes the desk, Mr. President.
Okay, we do have some adjourning motion. Would everyone please stand?
That means everyone.
I move that we adjourn in memory of Ram Mohan Baji, who was a member of the immigrant East Indian family who settled in San Francisco. After college, he was drawn into the Indian freedom struggle. During his several months in India, he met and traveled with Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, and I'd ask that we adjourn in his memory. He became a journalist in Hollywood and a correspondent, and after Gandhi's death, he acquired the rights of the film on his life, and he leaves 3 sons, a daughter, and 3 grandchildren. Any others? Call the roll. Aye. The council is adjourned.